Louisiana Florida Parishes history and Americans history.
Okay, go back.
African Americans have a rich history both in Louisiana Florida Parishes history and Americans history. What are some of the stories? Who are some of the people? What is unique about those stories and people? Let's find out. This live stream Zoom session will explore the history of African Americans in the Louisiana Florida parishes. On the third Tuesday of each month at 7 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time, I will choose a different topic and invite special guests to explore the rich of African Americans in the Louisiana Florida parishes. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to, give me 1 minute. Okay, good evening, everyone. I am so excited to have everybody join us tonight for this very, very special show. I've been following and watching this very special lady who is from Tangipahoa Parish, talk about her family history, share these beautiful photographs, and I can say so much about Lorraine Lizana. I am going to let her come on and talk about who she's going to be talking about, what she's going to be talking about, and the location. So, hi, Lorraine, how are you?
Hi, good evening. How are you?
I am doing fine. Thank you for asking. We are so excited to be talking to you tonight because you have so much to share.
Well, I'm happy to be here, and I would love to share information about my great grandfather and grandmother, who's Lim Irving Sr. and Susie McKnight Irving.
Lorraine, before we go into your PowerPoint presentation, I would just like to ask you, in what areas did your family come from? Was it Mississippi, Louisiana, or was it all in Louisiana? Do you know?
Well, it was basically in Louisiana, although I did find that Grandma Susie was born in Mississippi, but they seemed to settle in Louisiana shortly after her birth. And so most people started out in Louisiana.
Did I hear you mention one time the surname Ross?
Yes, I found that Grandma Susie's mother's name was Melinda Ross, but that's as far as I've gotten. I've not been able to find out, and that she was born in Mississippi also, but I've not been able to find anything else about her.
Okay, because a couple of weeks ago, there was a lady named Lynn Dorsey who came down to do some research in East Feliciana Parish, and she found that her family member was also a Ross. And when she told me the name, I said, I heard that name before, and I said, there's a lady named Lorraine who also have that Ross family line. So when I was there, I just took a peek to see if there was any people in the marriage records and those sort of things with that last name Ross.
Okay. Well, she was, Grandma Susie was born in Gloucester, Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would be a start to do some research on it, to find out about Melinda. But it was a different last name. Melinda was Ross. I never saw anything with Grandma Susie's name as Ross.
Okay. So you just let me know when you are ready to introduce us to your PowerPoint. Let me just pull it up for a second.
Okay.
We are really excited to hear what you have to share with us.
Taking a lot of work to put it together, believe me. Lots of background information to research.
And I thank you personally for doing it, because I know the work that goes into this.
I'm sure you do.
Going back 1,000 times to make sure you have everything like you want it.
That the information fits too.
That's right.
Because sometimes there's names that's so similar You could be
Mm-hmm.
looking at the wrong person, so you have to be sure that you can match birthdays or locations where people are, things like that.
Yes,
So it
yes,
is
yes.
very tedious to do.
Okay, so here we have the Irving family history presented by Lorraine Lizana. Okay, tell me when you're ready.
Okay, you can stay there for a minute. Um, I am seeing,
Did I lose you? That's just like things that happen. Let's give her a moment to come back in. She may have to call to get back in. I think it kicked her all the way out. In the meantime, until she come back in the Zoom session, I would like to say that Tangipahoa Parish are the Florida parishes. And let me just name those Florida parishes for you. East Baton Rouge Parish, East Feliciana, Livingston Parish, St. Helena, St. Tammany, Tangipahoa Parish, Washington Parish, and West Feliciana. I was riding through Washington Parish over this weekend, and it was just so beautiful, just riding through the back way and in West Feliciana. All the parishes here have beautiful sceneries. And the one thing that I would like to do is document the undocumented history. So that is why I was inspired to do this program, is because there's so much history that has been undocumented. And I just said, no, there has been, we have contributed too much. We have done too much. We have helped to build these parishes for it not to be. I think Lorraine is back. Okay, Lorraine, I'm bringing you in now. For our history not to be documented. Okay, we do have her back. She's getting her audio in check, but we're ready whenever she's ready. I'm excited because she has some beautiful photographs to share, documents. And whenever you find photographs and documents, you are really happy because that's the one thing that most people would like to have. And Lorraine, if you can unmute yourself and turn on your camera and let's roll with it. But until she comes in, I want to say that my ancestors, I know they lived in Livingston, St. Helena, Tangipahoa, and Washington. I haven't found any of them in West Feliciana at this time, in St. Tammany. And I do have family members that live in Baton Rouge, but when it comes down to researching the family history, I have found them in Washington, Tangipahoa Parish, St. Helena. Now, and Livingston, East Feliciana. The Harrells came through East Feliciana and St. Helena and end up in Tangipahoa Parish. The Richardson side of my family and the Vining side of my family, St. Helena. I haven't found the Vinings in any other place except for St. Helena. Did we lose her again? Okay, she'll call back. So in the meantime, I don't want to present her presentation until she comes in. But in the meantime, I will just wait for her to come on and share this information. You know, whenever you're doing something, there's always a glitch. All right, here it is. All right, Lorraine. My hair is sticking up right there. All right, there you gotcha, Lorraine. Come on in. We are patiently waiting for you because you have something to share with us and to educate us. You're connecting with your audio, and if you could unmute yourself, and we'll be waiting for you. Let me just pull up your PowerPoint presentation again. You know, want to do something and and I'm gonna tell you, I don't care how long you plan and you're trying to get it just right. There's always a challenge. We signed on at 6:30, didn't have any problems. And we wait till the hour of, there we go.
Okay. I don't know. I was clicking buttons, but it was not working.
Yes, that's okay. You're back. You're back. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint and
Okay.
I'm going to stay right where you told me to stay. And whenever you're ready, please let me know and I will go to the next slide.
Okay. So I am Lorraine Lizana. I am the administrator for the Lim and Susie Irving estate, which happened in 2015. But I have long ties even before that because I was born on the homestead property. I've done lots of research to find out about the property that they've owned over the years, and I'll be talking about some of that. Next slide. So just to give you some context of what was happening in the era of Lim and Susie, I want to take you back to before the Emancipation Proclamation, which, as you know, that was in 1863. So Lim and Susie were both born before 1863, meaning that more than likely they were born as slaves. There were some people that were born free at that time, but the majority of Black people were born as slaves. So there was a lady from Connecticut named Lucy Mann, who came to Louisiana and married, well, she actually married someone named Mann. And so she decided to settle in the Roseland area. And during that time, she had 3 children. And so her name was Lucy. And then she had a child named Lucy. And for some reason, Grandpa Lim and Grandma Susie came to her property. And I find them there in the 1880 census. So that's when I first came upon Lim and Susie. Next. So Lim was born in 1854 and he died in 1942. Next. Susie was born in 1856 and died in 1944. I could not find a picture of Lim, but I had talked to one of my cousins named Otis Irving, who is now deceased. And the description he gave me of Lim is that he was a man of short stature, dark complexion. He had one eye. We don't know why he had the one eye, and he carried a whip. And then about Susie, he told me that she was a fair complexion, had beautiful long hair, is how he put it, and said that she was a very beautiful lady. So that kind of gives you an idea of how these people look. Next. So Lim and Susie had 11 children. The first was Lucy, then there was Charles, Robert, Thomas, Lim Jr., and Wilbert. Next. Alice, Ethel, Alma. Alma was my grandmother. Ralph, and Roscoe. And I am very happy to say that I actually knew and visited most of these people. I was 3 when Lucy died, but I remember her funeral very well. So that was probably my earliest memory. But I was able to go to these people's houses and knew something about them. Next.
Before we go on to the next one, I would like to ask you about Alice Irving Vernon. Is
Okay.
that how Jackie Dukes come in? Is that the line she come through?
Yes. Alice was her grandmother.
Okay.
So Alice and my grandmother were sisters.
Okay. Now the Perry. Know if the Perrys was out of St. Helena?
I don't know because that was my grandmother's second marriage. Okay. And I don't know where they originated from. I knew some of them too, though. Okay. Yes, I knew some of them as well.
Are you ready for me to proceed on?
I am.
Okay.
Okay, well, I guess I should have said something first. I wanted to talk about Lucy, and I forgot that. So Lucy was the first child of Lim and Susie. And from that, with her name being Lucy, I gathered that the person's property where they initially settled in Roseland, that lady was named Lucy, and her daughter was named Lucy.
Okay.
So from that, and also Lucy sold my grandfather his first piece of property. So from those things, I came to the conclusion that it must have been a fairly good relationship because I don't think Grandpa Lim would have named his first child Lucy had it not been. So it seemed that Lucy was a nice person. Also, I found that Lucy donated a couple of acres of land to an AME Zion church, but it was not Big Zion. It was another church. So again, I took it that Lucy was a decent person.
Do you know if that other church was in Roseland or was another location?
I have someone checking that for me now. The section that it's in was not a section 20, which a lot of Roseland is section 20. It was a different section and I can't recall it at the time, but it was not Big Zion Church.
Okay.
Yeah, that was not. So then on to Big Zion Church. The Irving family started in the Big Zion Church, and many of the family members still attend, and I attended as well. That's where I got my public speaking from and different training by having various programs, as well as my cousins did the same thing, or you sang in the choir. I even played for the kids' choir, that kind of thing. But we all started in the Big Zion Church, which is the mother church of the Zion Conference.
My great grandmother Emma Mead Harrell, she attended Big Zion, and she's also buried over in the cemetery there, along with her husband, her father-in-law, and a lot of her children. And looking at the church, it was established in 1860 before it was emancipated.
Yes, I noticed that as well. That as well. Okay, next.
Before we move on to that, I see you have a cornerstone. The picture of the cornerstone. Okay, some of the names I see is the Morris. The Morris family was a big family. I see Alvin Deamer.
My brother.
Okay.
So he was a trustee at the time.
Okay, Solomon. I see. Who else? Johnson. Cornerstones are very important to the history of the church. Do you find that to be, Lorraine?
Yes. It lets you know, well, for when it was established, one thing, and then who were some of the more prominent members in the church. So that's why you see all the names on this cornerstone. One thing I will say about this, though, which is very unfortunate, the reason that they had to get a new church is that the old church was burned. At a time when many churches was being burned, Big Zion fell to that situation. And so then they built the new church.
Do you know Mayor Wanda McCoy there in Roseland?
No, I know of her, but I've never met her.
She had a couple of old photographs of some of the old school photographs, not of the old church, but I would have loved to see a picture of the old church, the old wooden church before it became what it is now.
Right. And that's where I went, and there was a bell in the tower that they would ring that old church bell for service, and then if there was a funeral, because I can remember that ringing for my Aunt Lucy's funeral. But I don't think the new church has a bell.
Lorraine, across the street from the church, there is a little wooden building. I think your cousin Sandra Turner said that it was like a little packing house or something where they would have the produce ready to go to the market. Do you remember that little house?
No, I don't remember that house, but I know of another house that my cousin built when she got married, but I don't remember a packing house. But I know from another cousin, Laverne, that land was farmed also, because my
Okay.
grandfather owned that land too.
Okay. Well, I'm
And
ready.
where Sandra lives and Annette McCoy Irving, he
Mhm.
owned all of that.
Okay. I'm going to proceed for you. Mhm.
Okay. So what did Lim and Susie do? Lim and Susie were entrepreneurs. And I say that because they were in the farming business, for one, but they were in the business at a time when everything was done by hand. So therefore, you see the picture of the man plowing the mule. You see people with the hoes, doing manual labor. He also had dairy farm, and I'm sure he had pigs and chickens and things like that too, because he had a large family. So when bad times came, like the Great Depression and what have you, his family didn't have to eat soup. And that's why you see the picture of the soup. They didn't have to stand in the soup line
Mhm.
because they were growing their own food.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
they had things like strawberries and cabbage and beans and various kinds of vegetables. And of course, I'm sure they had the pigs and things like that for the meat. Next. Lem and Susie was also entrepreneurs when it came to real estate. So I have researched and found that Lim had bought 9 properties during his last lifetime. All of them were located in Roseland. And what I could find totaled about 124 acres. And the prices range, it should have been from $100 for 10 acres to $800 for 12 and a quarter acre. And his purchases total over $3,300. And I wanted to show $800 was the last 1929 purchase. Slide, next,
Mhm.
click.
Before we move on, when you say land was so cheap, that very land right now could be going for 10,000 an acre,
That's
but
true.
they definitely they did very well for themselves to purchase 9 properties between 1886 to 1931. That was
And,
really good.
and keep in mind of that's not too far out of slavery,
That's
so keep
right.
that in mind. And still being a Black person,
Hmm.
and also with that number of children. So he had a lot of mouths to feed. So he had a lot going on, but he was still able to purchase land.
And
So he saw
Lorraine,
he saw that value in land.
exactly.
I doubt that back then they were putting money in the bank, but their
Mhm.
bank was the land.
Something you said about the soup line reminds me of if you lived in the rural area and you had land, uh, the people that remained in the South on the land, they didn't know hungry days. So there
True,
was no soup line. I
true.
mean, they didn't go to the store for anything other than the coffee, sugar. I think my mother said coffee, sugar, and flour is
Flour.
basically what they went to the store for. But everything else from the livestock, the chickens, every vegetable you can name, and what
Mhm.
they didn't grow, somebody else grew, and they did a lot of swapping in that time
True,
too.
true. And they had the cows for milk and for butter too,
That's
because
right.
I remember churning butter for my grandmother.
Yeah, my mom talked about that.
They were pretty self-sufficient.
That's right.
Self-sufficient.
Okay, let's see what done happened.
So next, I just wanted to reemphasize that $800 in 1929. Next.
Okay, I got to go out and come back in.
Okay.
Look like okay, that was on slide. Okay, here we go. Lorraine,
Yes,
okay,
I can't see the slides.
okay, you can't see the slide. Let's see what's going on right now. Okay, see it now?
I see.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I wanted to talk about being raised on the homestead. Next. So in the homestead, I'm calling where the house was. The house is
Mm-hmm.
burned now, but that's the 27 acres that remains in Roseland on Washington Avenue. So Lim and Susie actually raised my mom, who's the little child in the picture, and her brother, Walter. So
Mhm.
Lena Mae and Walter. My grandmother had moved back from Chicago and was staying with her parents. And then when she left and married somebody else, she left her kids with her
Yeah.
parents. And
Mhm.
so Grandma Susie helped to raise my mother and her brother.
You
Next.
know, a lot of times when you say left, they just back in that time, those grandparents kept the children. It was like you had the children, but it was actually their
They,
children
right,
because they will take them and say, "Look, you go, but the baby's gonna stay with
right. They
me."
can stay with them. True. And then there's me and my brother. I was
Oh,
born on the homestead, just like my mom was born at that homestead property. And I was also
such a
delivered.
cutie.
Thank you. I was also delivered by my Aunt Lucy, who was a midwife. And,
Oh,
and my
really?
mom was too, delivered by the same person. So I think that's very unique, very
Yes, it
unique.
is.
And then
Yes,
when
it
my
is.
brother was born, he was born in the hospital.
Okay, and you by the midwife. Because you know, I really feel that we need to document the history of the midwives. I only know of Mandy Wheat, but I'm more than sure there was others listening to you talking about your Aunt Lucy,
Hmm.
who's a
And she
midwife.
delivered other children in the family as well.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, other children in the family.
Mhm.
Oh, can you go back? Is it
Yes.
possible to go back?
Let me go back a little bit. Sure.
Okay, that house where my mother
Mhm.
is, that was the homestead property. That was taken at the homestead. And I wanted to say a little bit about that homestead. It was a two-story house, which was quite unusual for a Black person to have back then. So it was very large. And as I said, I grew up in that house. And it was a really big oak tree in the front yard. Um, the house had a sidewalk, again, which was unusual.
That's what I was noticing, a
Yes,
sidewalk
it
there.
set back from the road, and so there was a sidewalk there, and it had beautiful flowers, like crepe myrtle trees and called it japonica trees and roses, things like that. So that's part of the house. You can see maybe the porch there and the steps from that
Lo-
property.
Lorraine, is there any remnants of the house that's available? Like if you're on the road and you look to the right, I mean to the left, do you see any of it there?
Well, you could at one time, and I have a picture of it.
Mm-hmm.
There was a chimney because the house burned.
Oh,
There was a chimney that stood for years, but recently I was talking to my cousin Shirley, and she said that after one of the strong storms, that the chimney fell.
oh,
So, but
okay.
I'm glad I took a picture before it did. But you'll see that
Yes,
later. Yeah, you'll see
yes.
that later. Okay, now next. So, Roseland Church of God in Christ, which is on Holy Hill. My grandfather is tied to that church because he purchased land from one of his friends, had come upon hard times. This was back in 1927. And the friend and his children left to go to Chicago. But he had a bill that he owed at the local general store. And so the owner of the general store was suing that person. His name was Henry Claiborne. And my grandfather went to the sale and brought that property, 15 acres and a pair of mules and whatever structures was on it. And he brought that property for $600. And after he brought that property, he sold a half an acre to Roseland Church of God in Christ. And the person you see standing, John Wesley Richardson, is one of the signers on that deed.
Mm, mm,
I
mm.
do have a copy of that deed. I've been talking to Pastor Richardson about that. We've been collaborating recently on it. And he provided me with this picture of his uncle, John Wesley Richardson.
And Lorraine, I would like to say before you go on to, you know, talk about anything else,
Mhm.
my grandmother, Josephine Richardson Harrell, when she married my grandfather, Jasper Harrell, John Wesley Richardson was one of the witnesses with a man named Emmett N. Richardson. And so when you finish your PowerPoint, we'll let everybody know just what our new findings is in the research to find that we all come from the same plantation.
Yes.
Finding your ancestor, which you came through Andrew to Nathan, I came through Carrie, and to see that John Wesley Richardson was on my grandmother's, was a witness, that was no stranger to them.
Right, right.
You know, because a wedding was, you know, that's, you invite people who you're close with to witness your ceremony.
Yeah.
And I want to thank you for sharing this, and thank Superintendent Richardson for sharing this, because this gives me an image, a view of the man who witnessed my grandmother's wedding.
Right, right. Well, I was glad to get it in. And so too, when you see these deeds, you get to see the signatures of the persons that, you know, actually signed those documents. And I always thought that was fascinating too, to see signatures of people that's no longer here. So
okay, now let's go back to the church history. This church that we're looking at, was Superintendent Richardson's father affiliated with this church, of the one that's in Kentwood, as we know, is it Orange Grove? Yes.
I think he is affiliated.
Okay.
Superintendent Richardson is affiliated with Orange Grove. I've heard him.
Yeah, yeah, he's the pastor there. Yes.
Okay, yes. And so this is the new superintendent, Jimmy Richardson, who lives on Holy Hill. And this is a picture of the new church that they built. Okay, so that's how the Irvings are tied to the people at the Roseland Church of God in Christ.
Okay, okay. And so you and Superintendent Richardson's are cousins.
We could be. I'm not sure, because of the different lines that, you know, that we discovered in our other research. And I'll talk more about that research when I do the Richardson presentation. That's next week. I think we scheduled that for next week to talk about the Richardson. Okay, so next. Okay, I would say that the Irvings, in addition to being entrepreneurs and real estate investors, they were also humanitarians. And why do I say that? Because I found documents that Lem Irving, Reuben Brown, Jake Leonard, Lard, and J.S. Callahan were trustees. And so they were the original trustees to set up the school for colored people in Roseland. And so I have the deed where they purchased the land. I think that was 2 acres that they purchased to build the original school. And it was called Big Zion Elementary School. And I attended that school. That building is no longer there. But I and my cousins attended that school. And so that's why I'm saying he was a humanitarian. So he was thinking not just of himself, he was thinking of other people too, to help them make a way for themselves. Next.
That's awesome. That's amazing.
Yes. Next. Okay. They were also humanitarians because oftentimes Lem will buy large tracts of land and then he'd sell it to other people. So maybe they were not able to buy a large tract, but then I saw in documents, well, he would sell somebody maybe an acre, 2 acres, or 3 acres. And sometimes it would be at a discount, because I saw where one tract he had bought for $15 an acre and he sold it for $10 an acre.
Oh, wow.
So again, he was trying to help out other people. So to me, that's being a humanitarian.
Lorraine, that's what I found for most of these communities here. And that's why I'm grateful for this show, this segment, you know, because it gives me the opportunity to focus on just the local area. So looking at what Lem Irving did is the same thing that the Lawson's family did over in that community, Reed's community. And it's the same thing that the original, or let's say the ones that bought Butlertown, they started to do the same thing, selling lots and establishing those African American communities. So yes, they were humanitarians and really helped to build those communities.
Yes, they did. I was also told by my cousin, I have a recording of her, which I'm so grateful I did before she passed, Laverne Blivens, who was Laverne Irving Blivens. And she told me also that they were in the business of selling food, but there's times when people didn't have the money that they would often give them food as well. So
I can believe that.
Yes, yes. So that came from Laverne. Next.
I wonder why I keep getting stuck for some reason. Okay, I can just go on down. Okay, we did that one. We'll bring you back in.
And I'm sure people listening will know a lot of these names that I've mentioned today too.
Let me just run it this way. That way we won't get stuck like we did a few minutes ago. Okay.
Okay. So next slide would be number
11.
11. Yes. Okay. So with number 11, I'm saying that Lim and Susie were also survivors because again, think of the times that they were in, not far from slavery, and what was going on at the time they were living. During the Great Northern Migration, when many people were moving from the South, including some of their children, to get away from farming, to find a better life, higher pay. Same thing people are doing now, actually, but it was called the Great Northern Migration. Then they also went through the Wall Street crash, which was in 1929. And during 1929, Lim was still purchasing property, according to some of his deeds. And then there was the Great Depression, again, where people are out of work. But with him having his farm, he could hire people and, sell his produce and everything. So they were able to survive all those things. Whereas some people, especially with the Wall Street, you hear of people jumping out of buildings and things like that because they lost everything they had. And I could not find where he lost any of his land during any of this time. So
I just found that the people in the rural communities did a lot better than the urban and in the large cities, really.
I agree. They did. They could do their own farming and have their food. So that was quite a help. Next. So in my research, I wanted to let the audience know that when you're doing research, you can find a lot from a person's death certificate. So here I have the death certificate for Lim, and Lim was 88 when he died. That's reflected on there. It tells where he was living when he died, if he was married or not. And then there's a section that's highlighted about his parents. Now, I did not know his father's name was Lim Irving, so I'm not sure if that part was correct, but it says that's what it says. And his daughter, Lucy, filled it out and said his father was from Mississippi. His mother was named Jane Carpenter, and she was from Mississippi. So that requires more research because I'd like to find out more about that. Death certificates also tell what the cause of death. And in this case, he had heart disease and hypertension, and he was old. He died of old age too, is what they put on here. So death certificates can be very important.
And looked like N.A. James was the funeral
home. Yes. Yes.
Now, where's the cemetery? Do they say where he's buried at?
No, but I know they're buried in Big Zion.
In Big Zion.
I was going to mention that later. Yes. Next. So this is the death certificate for Susie. So Susie was 87 when she died after him. It tells about where she was born. Will give other information that she had lived. She was living in Tangipahoa Parish in Roseland at the time of her death. Now here for parents, it says the father don't know, Birthplace, don't know. Name of her mother, Melinda Ross. So that was gleaned from her death certificate,
Mhm.
but she didn't know where her mother was born. Now, we were always told that Susie father was a Hendry, which is a white family in the
Mhm.
area, but I need to do some research. But I did find that when she married Lim, the name on her marriage papers was Susan Henry.
Okay.
Hendry. It's Hendry, Hendry. So at one time she was using that name. I do not know where the name McKnight. She used McKnight as a middle name, but I've
Mhm.
not been able to find out where that came from.
Uh-huh. I've seen cases like that too. And you would think that the person who's getting married would know the surname of their maiden name, because a lot of
Right.
times people say, well, that wasn't her name, but they would know.
But she used Hendry as her maiden name on
Hmm.
that marriage license. Yes. Or marriage application, I'll put it that way.
Hmm.
Okay, next slide. So this is a picture of the chimney at the homestead
Oh, yes.
that's no longer standing. So I'm glad I have that. So
Yes.
that was their life. They lived on that homestead in Roseland, and then in death, they are buried at the Big Zion Cemetery. And you can find a lot from the headstones because you can
Hmm.
see when they were born, when they died, and their names, of course. So I wanted to include that. Now, the legacy of Lim and Susie, I wanted to show pictures of some of the family members. And
Hmm.
some people I got pictures from, some people I had a hard time getting pictures. So I even went to their Facebooks to get some of the pictures. So this first one is the Charles Irving family. This is Laverne that I had mentioned earlier with her
Uh-huh.
son. And the other people are from the Vernon family. So in this family that I know of, we have two doctors.
Okay.
Edgar is a PhD in engineering type doctor. And then we have an actual physician doctor, which is Sherry Miller.
Hmm.
So that family produced at least two doctors.
And who's the beautiful children in the photograph?
Those are Laverne's children
That's
when
uh-huh.
they were small. Yes.
Beautiful. I
Hmm.
remember those little dresses because my mom would dress me that way.
Oh, yeah, they look cute. Very cute. Okay,
Okay.
next.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of watching the time, so I'm going a little fast here.
Mm-hmm.
So the next is Lim Irving Jr.'s family. That's his daughter, Evelyn, the first picture there. And then the next three are Lim's grandchildren. And then the next one with the uniform, I do want to talk a little bit about. We call her Nisi, but her name is Chandra. So Chandra received quite an accomplishment. She became a colonel, which is the highest distinction in the Army Reserve. So I wanted to give her a shout out. I think that's a very unique position, but she's also a CPA and a realtor. So she's a busy lady,
Amazing.
very busy. Next.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the Thomas Irving family. Thomas moved to Chicago, so I never did meet him. But this is his son, McKinley, which a lot of people in the Tangipahoa Parish and beyond probably know
Yes.
because he was a tailor, very well
Yes.
known. So
Yes.
he made things for weddings and proms and things like that. So
Uh-huh.
he was very well known.
I
And then
had the
this,
opportunity to meet him at his establishment, his business establishment in
okay,
Amid, and people are still talking about him as a tailor. So I know his daughter, Beverly.
okay.
Hmm.
He has a brother that's still living, Norman, and then a sister deceased named Beverly.
Yes.
Next.
And matter of fact, before we move on, she sort of made history because I think she was the first African American woman hired to work in the clerk's office here in AMIT.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that.
Uh-huh. Matter of fact, it was her niece and her namesake, Beverly, sent me a copy of her obituary, her funeral
Okay,
program, and I was able to get that information off there.
okay,
Mhm.
okay. Next. Okay, this is the Wilbert Irving family. One of Wilbert's daughters she was a teacher, Lois Perry, but she also had a restaurant that was famous for that was in Butlertown. So
Mm-hmm.
that's from the outside of the restaurant. Then there was Irene at the bottom, who was one of Will's daughters. And then this is Carol, who is a granddaughter of Wilbert. Next.
And on this note, the Perry Drive-In, the drive-in served as the place for meetings during the civil rights movement. A lot of politicians, a lot of movers and shakers, grassroots organizers used to meet at Perry Drive-In. It was Glennis Gordon that shared that information with me one day
Okay.
when her and Donald was talking.
Okay, good, good. I was
So
not
that's a
aware of
historical
that.
place. That's a
Okay.
historical place. Okay, I can go
Next.
to the next one.
Okay, this is the Alice Irving Vernon family. Alice married Fred Vernon. And so they had, I believe it was, need to go back.
Oh, go back. Yes.
4 children, I believe it was. And the lady at the bottom with the blue is the daughter, Dorothy Vernon, with her nephew. The beautiful ladies at the top during a wedding, those are the James sisters. Those are Dorothy's children. And then to the right of the sisters is the man in the middle, and the lady to the right, that's Fred and Alice's son and
Is that
granddaughter.
Jackie?
That's Jackie to the left, yes. I hope she's watching. I hope she's watching. And then below that is another part of the Vernon family as well. I don't know all the names there.
I have a question to ask you.
Okay.
Did the James sisters ever sing? Because somebody was telling me about a group called the James family, the James sisters in Roseland, Louisiana, used to be singers. Do you know?
Well, their dad, the people that you see, their dad used to sing with his brothers. And so I don't know that the people in the picture sang as a group, but some of their cousins did.
Okay. All right. All right.
Yes, the James family. Next. Okay, this is my family. I didn't have a picture of my grandmother, but this is my mother to the left of me.
Beautiful.
The next one. The man underneath my mother is her brother, Thomas Perry. Okay, to the right of him is my brother, Alvin. And then go back to the top is my son, Charles Jr. And at the bottom is my daughter, and he's an automotive consultant. My daughter, Lisa, below him is an attorney. And then the 2 teens to the right are Lisa's children. So that's my only grandchildren.
Lorraine, the genes are so strong. I'm looking at you, and you say your mother, right?
That's my mother to the left. Yes, very first.
Your mother and your daughter, you all, the smile, just the demeanor, you can see those genes are very
genes
strong.
Are there.
Yeah, very good looking family.
And I noticed too, when you put the picture of the promo for this, I favor my grandmother a lot too.
Yes.
On that picture. Yeah. Okay, next. Ethel Irving. Ethel did not have any children of her own. So I mentioned earlier, she helped to raise my mom. So I gave her a family too. But she never had any kids of her own. So that's her, the lady in the very first picture to the left up top. And then that's my mother below at the homestead. And her brother to the right, which she raised those people. And then there's my brother, and me, the little girl with her fingers sticking out. And then there's Aunt Ethel, who got to see my children when they were born. So I gave her a family.
How sweet.
Yes.
How sweet.
So next. So this is the baby of the family, Roscoe Irving, and I did not have a picture of him, but this is his son, AG, the very first picture to the left. And AG was a teacher. He taught automotive classes. And then that's AG's daughter in the middle, Stephanie. And then to the very right is AG's brother, Otis. Otis was a twin. So to my knowledge, we had one set of twins in the family. Ralph Irving, I did not have any pictures of anyone in his family, but I did want to mention it. He drove school bus, and they had a store and did farming too. Ralph did.
Was that in Tangipahoa Parish?
Yes,
Okay.
not too far from the homestead.
Okay.
They all live fairly close together.
Okay.
Yeah, on Washington Avenue. Okay, next. So this, what you just saw was the legacy for Lim and Susie. Again, no picture of Lim. And then this picture I just recently received when I had someone clean out my mother's house. She had this picture in an old trunk, and I was so happy to get it.
Oh,
I
wow.
had it restored, and I have the original frame for that picture,
Oh, that's
which is,
amazing.
I think it's about 80 years old now or so.
Mhm.
And so I have that picture, so I wanted to show that. Next.
To be continued.
So
I like
this is
that.
to be continued. By no means has all the story been told, because there's still so much that we don't know about our ancestors. So it's going
And
to take,
still learning.
we're still learning. Exactly. Exactly. So that's the end of my presentation.
Well, thank you. Thank you. That was a wonderful presentation. Lorraine, um, oftentimes the history of African Americans in Tangipahoa Parish, a lot of it haven't been documented. What do you think about what we are doing now to inform and to educate people about the history of those that came out of this area?
Well, I think it's a good thing, because it should make people appreciate where you are now. Because in my case, when you can see what Grandpa Lim and Grandma Susie were able to do with times as they were, we should be able to do better, because we've had the opportunities to get education. They probably never went to school, um, couldn't read and write at first because of the time that they were in.
Mhm.
I eventually, at first, when I looked at these, I would see X's for Lim's signature. And then eventually I would see a signature. So I don't know if it's his or somebody wrote it, but I
Right,
would see X's. He was buying property, but he was making X's.
right, right.
So we should feel proud of what they were able to do. That should push us to go farther than they did, because we've had the opportunity to get more education. So to
Mm.
me, that means we should do better.
When I created this blog called Exploring African American History in the Florida Parishes, I am proud to say that it has over 400,000 readers
Oh, wow. That's excellent.
in the world, all over the world, people have read these blogs. And so a lot of the stories that have been written, they are, other magazines are picking these stories up, newspapers, documentaries. And so I'm really happy to know that all that our ancestors contribute to these parishes is not being forgotten.
Right.
And it's our responsibility to tell our story, like you are
Exactly.
telling the Irving story.
Hmm.
You know,
Well, when I first started to do research, I went to the library in Amet, and some lady had done some research, and I saw his name in there one time. It was one little sentence
mhm,
about Lim Irving. That was it. And then as I did my research more and more, like, it's more to Lim Irving than that one sentence. And that's why I tried, and I first started doing research on deeds because I was the administrator. And so that led me to build a narrative about him and what they were doing, just looking at his property that he was buying and selling. And then I got subscriptions to Ancestry,
mhm.
.com, which is amazing to me.
Yes,
So I
yes.
did a lot of research. You can find the census records on Ancestry. And so then it's up to us to preserve those records so that they could be passed down. And for other family members too, they can join the Ancestry community. And there's also one called Family Search that you can
Mhm.
join and find out information about your ancestors. And I'll say this about um, Ancestry.com. I submitted my DNA a number of years ago. I have found so many cousins. Ancestry DNA works. I found cousins that I knew, and that's how I knew it worked. And then I found cousins I didn't know, and I have since contacted them and have been able to match surnames in our family. So ancestry works.
Matter of fact, it was so strange because a couple of weeks ago, there was a group of women came down and it was their first time in Louisiana. And you said, wait a minute, I just reached out, just emailed, and here it was. She was right here.
Yes,
What a
exactly.
coincidence, huh?
It was. That was amazing. Such a good surprise. A
Yes,
very
yes.
good surprise.
Mhm.
But yes, ancestry DNA works.
Yes. And I want to say what kind of piggyback off what you just said. You said that when you first started researching, you saw limb in one sentence. Well, almost 30 years ago when I started researching, I didn't find too much on anyone,
Mm.
in this community. I said, wait a minute, Tangipahoa Parish was formed in 1870. I know it was here. I know the many contributions. And I just had to get busy making sure that we did something about the lack of information and the lack of the history that wasn't there on the people who we know was part of the fabric of this society.
For sure, for sure. But it will make you think that we never did anything.
I know.
And a lot of history will make you think that Black people made no contribution. And we didn't learn about things in school. We were not taught a lot of things I learned as an adult
Hmm.
and with the advent of the internet. So,
That's right.
yes,
That's right.
but it would make you think that we didn't contribute when we really did.
And Lorraine, that's why it's so important that we identify those historic buildings and places in the history and get these historic markers in place because there is not any. There should be a historical marker at that location, Big Zion Cemetery. You have the church right there, you have the school right there.
Yeah,
And we all should do that. I just think that would be great to really put the history there because the children need to know, you know,
exactly. They did.
and everyone needs to know because most of the time, when you talk about your ancestors like Lim, they donated for the school, they donated for the church and the cemetery, you know.
Well, the cemetery, I did some research on that. I was told about that cemetery, but actually I found that someone else owned that land. That it
Mhm.
really was not Lim. It came
Mhm.
another way, and we can talk about that at another time. But they did do a lot of
But
things.
they did a lot, and so I just want to thank you for sharing your beautiful family history. And like you said, is to be continued.
Yes,
And I really can't wait until we can all do the Richardson. And I'm going to do this next month after Superintendent Richardson is taking a DNA test.
okay.
So we're trying to take a DNA test of all these Richardsons to see how we're connected, if we're connected. But I did find all the people that I'm talking to, like yourself, Superintendent Richardson, and my family on the same plantation owned by the same people,
Yes,
Benjamin and Cecilia Richardson. And so when I look at that number, they own 20, it was 26 people. But when I look at their ages, I said, well, I wonder if they could have been brothers and sisters. What was there any relations? The only way we can find that out is through DNA.
yes, for sure, for sure.
In
Well, mine
closing,
is in the system, so
all
we'll see.
right,
And
right,
that's how I was able to connect with some of the Richardsons that just came to visit you was
yes.
through Ancestry. Yeah, through that DNA profile.
Amazing.
Hmm.
Before closing, is there anything that you would like to share with us?
Well, I can say that it has taken a lot of work just
Mhm.
to put this together. And I was working on, because as I said, I'm the administrator, so I was working on researching the deeds and the such. But it's also a labor of love
Yes, it
because
is.
I respect those people, Lim and Susie, and what they were able to do at the particular time that they did it. So it was time consuming, but a labor of love. I know you said it was bad weather there, so maybe the weather is affecting the stream.
Our history in the Florida Parish, the Louisiana Florida. Forward to having you as a guest in the future to talk family history.
Right. Next time I'll be talking about
we go out.
My grandmother on my father's side, which that's the Richardson family. And so next time I'll make a presentation on them.
All right. Well, thank you for being again. Our Zoom session has come to an end for tonight. I hope that you enjoyed and learned something from the information that was shared by our special guests. If you have any information, stories, or photographs, or other information that can be helpful to us to explore the Louisiana Florida parishes, please contact me at nurturingourroots@gmail.com. Please and subscribe to our page, and thank you for joining us tonight. Good night, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you once again, Lorraine.